right, so what I want to share, I want to talk about is the collision of like, how do you drive your team? And I need this blocked on purpose.
I was just moving them forward because
you want this?
Should be recording.
So not recording yourself. Oh, got it. The sound. Okay. Let me block this. Give me 1 second. Where's this? All right, so what happens is that once you launch a training class, here's what happens with most managers, right? You launch a training class, they come to AT, you might do proper PDI for them Tuesday, Wednesday, they come to the team meeting, and then that's it. And then they don't really get talked to for their last 4 or 5 days, like Thursday, Friday, like especially Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Back in the day, we had 3-day training, so it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then you had Sunday, Monday. So F that, like those 5 days, like you didn't really work with your guys that you launched last week because you were focused on who? The new training class, and you were in training all freaking day, you know? So you were in training all day. And so that's a normal thing that would happen, is that now those guys get kind of put to the side. All right. I'd rather you grab phones and take calls over there if needed than him. So as far as setting it up, you have to have a proper plan in order for you to manage both. Cool. Because you are in training for, 6-8 hours, and you guys have it so much easier now because there's video training happening. So like you can literally shoot out some text messages to your top people, like as the video is going on, and you're able to still communicate with them. Where before we used to be, we were running live the whole time and we're talking for 6 to 8 hours, like you weren't really talking to your guys. All right. But by the way, even when I ran live training, I talked to my people. And so that's what I want to go through, kind of like strategy and making sure this is always happening, is no matter what, you need to know who are your top 10 reps, top 10 producers for that week. Cool. Hunter, in our office this summer, you've got to know what's happening with the top 20 people. That's all I'm going to have you take care of when you're really looking at stuff, and like you need to know what's happening with those people. And Spencer will support, but like he's extra. He's an owner who's there to like coach. And when I was a DM, I went up to 30 summer of 2008, and we did 1.1 million that summer, 900 in new. And I remember my coach telling me, your job is to know what's happening with your top 30 each week, and that's it. I mean, it's great to know everybody, but no matter what, do you know what's happening with your top 30? But that's a super high performing. He's like, normally a DM office, a strong DM office should be 20. All right. And then there's, and then with new offices, any other offices, like if you know what's happening with your top 10 and you're driving those guys, if you're getting 10 people to the newsletter, and that's what I plan on, is getting those 10, and whoever didn't hit it, I knew that some of the training class was going to, so I was going to get 10 people no matter what. And if I did things right, I could get 15 or more. Well, guys, if you get 10 people on the newsletter, like statistics show, and you can listen to talks from Drew, he has so many metrics, he's measured it 1 million times, that on average, you end up having 2.5 that on the report, 2.5 times that on the report. So if you have 10 people, you end up having a $25,000 report. Cool. It's not 10,000, like just the whole team ends up being at about 25,000 on the report. So if you want to have a 50K week, then that means your focus is to get 20 people on the newsletter. And so that's how you want to drive each week as you guys look to see, okay, what do we want to sell this week? It's how many people do we want to have on the newsletter? You break it down backwards and you make sure you're managing those people no matter what, all right? And then can we get everybody else to sell something? And so we'll have different groups. We'll have the people that were like, hey, get an order. We'll have people that we're helping drive them to 500 plus. And then we have who are our newsletter people. And then we have our gunners. And our gunners are people who are either in their fast start, finish, like they're starting their fast start, finishing their fast start, or they're big pushers, or they're trying to win like a scholar, they're going for 100K summer or something, right? So those people are people who are going for like a 5K plus type of week, and so anyway, so just, you've got to know who those people are. So as you're going into the back half, like, are you aware? Obviously you should be aware from the beginning of the week, but do you know who are your most important people? You look at push periods. If you look at push periods in any office, it's when we sell the most Cutco, right? If you look at our SE2, you look at our SE1, like we sell the most, all right? If you look at trends through the years, during that time in July or even June, it's when our teams are at their largest sizes. And by the way, we manage the smallest amount of people and we sell the most. All right, if you look at it, we're focused on those 20 people or 30 people that are there every single morning, you know, like when we had these huge before, and even when it was 10 people or 15 people, and we have our biggest sales weeks of the summer. All right. Why? Because we're actually doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is managing our top 20% the right way. All right. We don't need to just do that in a push. Yeah, in a push, we're going to have that for like Alliance, and they're going to come in the morning, but we want to do this all the time. All right. Like that's how you drive big reports is, do you know what your top 20% is doing, you know, and are we actually managing and driving them? You can't count as the district manager, as the pilot manager. You can't count on anyone else, you know, with those 20%. Cool. Your assistant managers, your staff, your interns, all of those guys, they can help with everybody else, but you can put like your job is to drive your top 20%. All right. This doesn't mean when you're not running training, this means like always. Okay. So how do you do it when you go into training? So that morning before day one of training, that morning, I always talk to all those people. All right. So who are those 10, 20, or again, in our massive summer, it was 30. But I'm making sure I have a live phone call with those guys. When it's non-summer and they're in high school, then I am actually texting them. But by the way, I knew when they had lunch, you know, and some of those guys that had high school, I talked to them at 7:30 in the morning. Because the night before, I was like, I knew they started class at 8 or they started at 7:20 or whatever. And I was like, hey, let's talk at 7 before you go into class. Because I checked in everybody early in the morning and got those knocked out, you know? So Spencer will do a lot of that. Like he'll help with the early mornings because we're up early and check people in for the morning. But that's great that you're able to, check those guys in early before they even go to class and they're not interrupting anything else in your day, you know? And so you're like, hey, you ready to rock for today? Because those guys, most of the top guys, and by the way, if I'm talking to 10 or 20 people, it's only a couple people that were like high school people. But I would set those guys up and say, hey, by the way, do you have a top 10 list? All right. And by the way, the night before, this is so important in PDI that the night before you're setting them up for the next day. Right. And so the night before we already knew that they still needed to book 1 more for Friday and 2 more for Saturday. And I already asked them, hey, when are you going to make calls? And they might've said after school. And I said, hey, do you think we can make like 10 calls before school starts and 10 calls during lunchtime? Because you're going to catch moms in the morning, obviously taking the kids to school. And during your lunch break, you're going to catch people on their lunch break, you know, and 10 calls doesn't take them that long, you know? And so like, yeah, I can make 10 calls. And I'm like, cool. I'm like, we'll probably book 1 or 2 right there. So just knowing like when are their peak times they're going to reach people, like these guys are available during those times. Yeah. Can you grab your son? So that's really big for you guys to know. And by the way, it's just intentionality, you know, making sure that you're setting yourself up to do those things. So I always talk to those guys before training starts. I know when they were making calls that day. I know what's happening. So what do I tell them? Like, hey, shoot me an update right after you make your calls of lunch and give me an update of like, hey, Kat, I made 10 calls. Reached 3, booked 1 for 7 o'clock Saturday. Cool. Can you do that for me? I'm going to be in training, but just shoot me a text with the results of how many calls, how many reached, how many booked. We always call those their magic numbers. Cool. And you can write that down as well. That's what I refer to them as. I'm like their magic numbers, which is calls, reached, booked. All right. So them always knowing what those look like, because that helps us track you know, how many people are they actually getting a hold of? You know, like if Eduardo, someone tells you, oh, I called 10 people. I spoke to 8 of them. I booked 2. There's a problem, you know, it's like, oh, what happened on the other, you know, like they're not building urgency, or like, you know, maybe they told them, but we have to find out what they said. Did they tell them to call them back, or did they tell them I'm not interested? Because if they're saying I'm not interested, that kid for sure is talking about the knives and I get paid to show this great kitchen stuff and you're going to love it. Like they're going off. And the person's like, oh, I'm not really interested. I'm not in the market, you know, but best of luck or whatever. Right. So we have to be able to diagnose what's happening, and we can't do that if we're not tracking their numbers and then being able to dive in. Okay. So when I was going into training, I knew when they were making calls, those 10 people. And again, do you have to know if we have 100 people on our team? Hunter, do you have to know what's happening with 100 people as you go into training? No, you have to know what's happening with those 20 people. Like what's happening with them. Like you should know what's going on with those 20 people. All right. And again, you guys in your new offices, at least 10. And as the team grows, like maybe you're like, oh, I'm going to commit to 15, and knowing what's happening with 15, that's up to you. But if you know what's happening with 10, I mean, as a branch, if you know what's happening with 5 and you're dry, and I'm talking about not just know what's happening, like, you know what's happening with your top 5 and you're driving your top 5 and helping them finish the week strong, you're going to have a great sales report. Like if every branch really focused on getting 5 people to the newsletter by Monday, you know, through their training, like you're going to have a hell of a summer. So anyway, so I go into training. So I'm getting those updates through the day, right? And when we go into cutting clinic, is always like, we did cutting, they're chopping. I did names and uses, they're chopping. I mingle and talk to some of the top guys in training, but that's a place I always wanted support. So that's when by week 2 or 3, you have your trainees from the class before. So here's what I would do for new offices. And we do this in our office too. I did this as a veteran, but I started it out of a necessity in my branch and in my new DM office. And then it just became a thing. And we did it in my veteran offices. And we haven't done this. I don't even know if we've done it here. But at the team meeting, and you could add this to on the board, we put for signups, because we do like phone jam signups and active advertising signups and workshop signups, right? And then I always had training support signups. And so there was, let's say training started at 10 a.m. There was a 9:30 to 10:30 a.m., you know, 2 or 3 spots that I'd put. We used to do like a live demo. So I had live demo and a spot for that. Cutting clinic, whenever I knew cutting clinic was going to be, I would do an hour and a half, like in that range, just because they'd help with setup, cleanup, whatever. But even if you do an hour and I'm like, oh, I know cutting's going to be at 2:30. So I'd be like 2 to 3:30. We have cutting clinic support, and I'd put a couple lines and I'd say, hey, by the way, is anyone available tomorrow from 2 to 3:30 to come help out with cutting? We have the new guys in, whatever. And there's always at least one person that's like, oh, I can come. I'm like, awesome. You know, and they'd come in. So then they would help with chopping and chit chat with people, you know, and have some fun with them. But I always wanted to have extra support, you know, just so they meet real people from the team. And then as my team grew, I'd mingle with a couple top people, and I'd always prep the other guy that morning or whatever. Hey, when you come in, these are the types of things to ask them. These are things to get them excited about. And again, you guys have that in your PDI thing, like things to talk about. And so I would coach them on that. So they didn't say stupid shit, you know, and I coached them to also ask people like, hey, how's your family, or how are you feeling? And when people were like, oh, they're not, be like, hey, that's normal, you know, like, but it's really fun or whatever. And just making them feel good, or say like, oh, talk to Kathy about that because she'll give you tips. Like her family was like that too, you know, and I'd have them kind of guide them to me because I wasn't expecting them to know how to say everything, but encouraging the rep to like, come talk to me. That way I can handle stuff, you know? But anyway, as cutting's happening, so once they start chopping, I'm like, hey, let's rotate. I have people helping from our team man the station, or I have AMs, right? But I also like to have team members. You came and helped with that sometimes. Like I still announce to them like, hey, we're having cutting. Hey, before training, I'd love to have some of you guys come mingle. And so we always had reps like just manning one of the cutting stations or manning rope and leather or whatever, and just mingling with people. It's so good for them to meet real people. All right. And then, excuse me. So during cutting, that's where I'm going to check my text to see like, you know, who's checked in, and like answer them real quick. All right. If there was someone that I didn't reach in the morning that's like a key performer, I'm giving them a quick call right there. Like I'm going to the bathroom and I'm giving them a quick call, you know, while cutting clinic's wrapping up, whoever I didn't reach. But again, this goes back to preparation. The night before, I told those guys, hey, check in with me before 10 a.m. because I want to talk to you before training, you know? And I knew what time they were checking in. They're like, oh yeah, I'll check in at 9. I'm like, hey, what time are you going to check in the morning? I'm like, I want to talk to you before training. So ideally before 9, so we could chat. So I already knew the night before when those 10, 20, whatever people, I had that ready to go on my PDI boxes. You see on the bottom there where there's a space. I always wrote down their names there and the time they were checking in the next day. So I like had it right there. You know, you can put it in web PDI as well, and it pulls up as tasks. I wasn't that fancy back in the day, and we didn't have web PDI. So I just wrote it right on there, and I just had like Lauren, 8 a.m. so-and-so, you know, and I call them in order based on when they were checking in. So anyone I didn't reach, I called them real quick there. I responded to text messages there, and just said, hey, great job, kick butt. I'm rocking training. I'll talk to you later on. Next call time is when, you know, and so we just interacted. So I knew that. And most of those guys were coming in that evening, because in the summertime, we run Thursday, Friday training. So I'm like, oh, I'll see you at 5 o'clock, you know, or I'll see you at whatever time. So I loved having like a key staff meeting on Thursdays, like that collided with training, and having someone kick off a video or whatever. And so having key people there at the office was always awesome. Anyway, so that evening, as soon as you go into phone jam, okay, and PCs, I did a pullback with my top guys, you know, just to let them know what to focus on, who to focus on, who to see. So I always pull back my top guys in the beginning of like in training. Yeah. So right when we're going to go to phone jam, I'm like, I need to see to do. I don't know if you remember that. I met with you guys separate. So I pull back the people that I need to pull back, and I'm like, hey, these guys right here, I need to have you guys, I'm going to meet with you guys. And then the rest, and by the way, when I was by myself, I called those names to the front of the room. I'm like, hey, I need to see you guys right here at my desk real quick. I'm like, everyone else can start calling, and then I'm going to call you guys up. All right. So I got those guys in the huddle. I'm like, all right, you guys are people that, you know, if there's someone that can hit these top levels, like you're the group. And I would talk a little bit lower. Everyone else is making phone calls. And I'm like, the biggest focus I need you guys to have right now, and I'm going to meet with you guys, is do not worry about anybody else but your max. Married, average age homeowners, like you want your number 1, followed by your number 2, followed by your number 3. Like if you set yourself up like that, you are going to get the best recommendations. Again, who do you want to focus on right now? Your best people. Do not worry about anybody else. By the way, they're not all going to pick up, and that's okay. But tomorrow, those first 2 demos should be 2 of your top 5, no matter what. In a perfect world, it's your number 1 and your number 2, but 2 of your top 5, no matter what. Sounds good? So I'm going to have you guys start making calls while I start meeting with everybody else, and then I'm going to meet with you guys, okay? And so I'd have them start making calls, and then I'd start meeting with the other reps. And then I'd meet with those guys, all right? And depending on the size of the training class, as soon as I was done with that, I'd start phoning with them. And then who was I phoning to? PDI. My top 10 people. Yeah. So I'd start phoning to my top 10 people during the end of that phone jam. So again, I meet with them, and then I'm like, all right, let's make calls together. And I'd have my top guys sit with me and make calls. I remember actually this summer, Javon, and I don't know if it was his cousin that also played softball. Like they were in training together. They were with me for like an hour making calls where I was like PDIing and they were booking demos. I'm like, nice, you got another one. And I was like talking to a rep and talking with them, but like I'd have them I'm like, yeah, you guys can sit and make calls with me. I'm going to be making calls for a bit, and I'll help you guys. Any questions you have, whatever you need, you know? So I always encourage my top guys to stay and make calls with me. And that was really big because it helped me drive my top people from my team and my training class at the same time, you know, like at the end of that day 1 phone jam. Then I'd always invite those guys. And so again, close out, like one of the biggest keys that a lot of people don't do is that close out PDI, setting up the next day. Like when you're closing it out, you know what's happening the next day. You know when they're checking in, you know what's happening, you know what they need to do. If you get that, it makes the next day so easy, you know? And so I'm like, all right, cool. So what's going down for tomorrow? I'm like, you only have 2 out of the 6. I'm like, where should your butt be tomorrow morning? And they're like, office. I'm like, yep. I was like, we'll be here. We have breakfast club. Trainees are coming in early to make calls. Come make calls with them, right? You experience that a lot of times, Miss Lauren. You came a couple times, Eduardo, but like invite them in to come in the morning. If they're not booked, like, hey, come, I'll see you in the morning. So you'll see them live, you know? And if for some reason, or if they're traveling or something's happening, we're not going to see them live, no problem. We have a check-in time. We know when they're checking in. And again, before 10, I'm like, hey, I need to talk to you before here because I'm running training tomorrow, you know? So they know that. And then in training, by the way, I didn't mention this with day 1. So day 1 and day 2, anytime they're role playing, I'm going to go like when I send them into role play immediately, I'll shoot a text. So I had a group text that I created. And so there's a bunch of different group text apps, okay, where you can send a text to a group, but they get it all individually, okay? That's something you want to have. There's free ones like text to group or texting, like there's different ones that are free up to like 20 people or whatever. And then you have to pay for the app if you want like big groups, you know, but that's like the best thing I ever bought was like paying for those apps, but I used free ones for a while. So get an app where I can text 15 people at one time, but they all get it separate versus it being group text, right? Yep, I did that during the summertime. I always do that. And so right there, when they start role playing, I go to my group text to my top 15 and I go, hey, how's it going? I'd love an update. Boom. And they'd all get it. And then I'd get texts coming in. But by the way, it was just, we were communicating while I was going around and going, Hunter, how you feeling so far? Any questions? You ready for this weekend? How's your weekend looking? And I'm opening up their weekend. All right. You want a big weekend pop? You got to open up their weekend. I'm like, how's your weekend looking? Oh, you work your other job on Saturday night? Okay, cool. And you work at the restaurant, right? I'm like, hey, I'm like, totally up to you. Best advice I was given by my buddy Peter when I started was to give my shifts away. I was like, I got my shifts covered. I ended up making $1,600 my first week. I'm like, I remember Erica, one of my girls, worked at the restaurant, and she got her Saturday night covered and her Sunday. And I told her, I'm like, and this is for the right kid. I'm like, I will guarantee you what do you normally make per shift on average per shift on a weekend? $100. I'm like, I will guarantee you that $100. I'm like, if you can get it covered, like if it's the right kid that I want doing demos. And I remember Erica did that. Erica sold $5,000 her first weekend, you know? So not only did I get my money's worth, but she also made $800, you know, on her first paycheck. And she was like, this is awesome. You know, and she ended up quitting her. And this was another Erica in Miami. And she left her restaurant job and just worked here full time that summer, you know? So I always recommend it. I'm like, hey, up to you. And I always leave it up to other people. Can you get me a bounty, please? Warp it up. I always leave it to any of my other second mans or assistant managers to like dive a little deeper. But again, when you're by yourself, just say, hey, if you're able to have anyone cover, the more availability you have, the better you're going to do. And weekends are amazing because everyone got paid. They're in good moods. And you can really get some great results there. All right. So
if it's just you, like during the PC time, are you just PCing like the top people, or are you?
Oh, you're gonna PC everybody. You're gonna PC everybody.
Okay. And how does that work?
So, like I said, I pull up my top people. I do kind of a group PC on who to focus on and what to do. I say, you guys start making calls and meet with the other guys, and then I'm gonna grab you guys. Gotcha. And then I start grabbing people, and you can grab them one or two at a time, depending how big the training class is. If it's 10 or less people, you can do them all one at a time. If you have a big training class and you have 15, 20 people and you're by yourself, you're gonna grab people two at a time, and you wanna pull likes with likes. So if there's two people that have no car, I want to pull them back together because I'm going to give them ideas on how they're going to do stuff. If there's two older people, I'm going to grab them together. If there's two people from out of town, I'm going to grab them together because I'm going to say the same shit to them, you know, so I can say it at one time versus saying the same thing to two separate people. There's, you know, and even with a smaller class, if there's two out of town people or with no car, I'll just grab them together and meet with them and talk to them about stuff. Unless someone's like a trouble person that's like, whoa, with this, you know, they're like super neg or whatever. So yeah, so again, during role plays, I shoot out a quick text. Hey, how's it going? I shoot me an update. And that way I'm interacting with those top guys and they're shooting me updates. And then when the next role play is happening, like I'm looking at those, maybe I got to see it before, maybe I didn't, you know, checking up on those guys. And then I know when they're coming that night. So again, the next day, when I'm in training, I've seen or talked to them that morning. And then throughout the day, when they're role playing the second day, when they're phone jamming, once I do the PCs the second day, so you do PCs day 1 and day 2, right? So when I do the PCs the second day, I PC them. But before I start the PCs, if there's any top people I still haven't talked to, I'm calling those guys real quick as they're phoning. And then I start grabbing them through their phone jam and meeting with them, okay? I am not dropping the ball on my top 10 reps or top 15 reps because I have reps who are finishing their fast start and I have gunners that I'm responsible to make sure that they kick ass, okay? Not anybody else, not whoever's doing PDI, not whatever. Whoever's doing PDI can help me with the rest. But remember this summer, I was like, hey, call these sections. Because I was calling the one section. Like as training started, I was calling those guys. All right. Every week I look at it and see who are, because I already know who those people are for that week. And by the way, what I mean by that is like, because you're gonna have people like you're leaving second week of March, you're not in my top 20. Why? You're not in town. So you're looking at that. There's people traveling, you know, they're out of town, they have family in town. So I'm always looking at that, where 3 of my guys last week might not be here this week. So who are those people? But I'd say that at least 70%, give it the phone, at least 70% hunters stays pretty consistent through the summer. And the more you're interacting with them and talking to them every day, you build relationships with those guys. Most of those guys stick around. Like those are most of the guys that stick around are the ones that I was working with, you know? And it's not because I was working, it's just like they're getting constant attention, you know? And if we can get all of our staff giving constant attention to people, and what we know is like, there's always the lower people that don't answer the phone and they just kind of disappear. Like that's part of it, you know? But there are people that if they got attention, they'd stick around, you know? So that's really the focus of there. So yeah, so as I'm in my second day of training, whenever they're phoning, my first thing is, do I know what's happening with all my guys? If I already talked to them earlier, they shot me a text, like I don't need to contact them, but if not, I'm making 2, 3, 4, 5 calls, and then I'm checking, you know, people's schedules and doing stuff, you know. If there were any that didn't pick up, I'm shooting them a text, yo, I'm starting training, but I still would like an update on what's happening for today. All right, and then later on, we'll chat. They also know to call in from their demos. And when you're by yourself, you are closing sales and training, and you got to get quick at closing sales. All right. And I when I'm on the phone with them, and we'll talk about that.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm assuming we get to go out.
No, hell no. You do it right there.
That's what I was thinking.
And they watch you, and you're like, that's what you guys are going to do later today. You're going to call me from your appointments. I'm going to help you close sales. So if they had a no sale, I don't spend time with them. I don't give them tips. I'll talk to them later on. I'm not going to do that during training. If they're like, oh, I'm calling to verify, I'm like, hey, do they like Cutco? I'm like, hey, let me know what they like so I can let you know deals. So they know their best options. Cool. Because if they're like, oh, they weren't going to buy anything, I'm like, hey, let me know what they like. I'm like, all right, show them this or show them that. So you can hook them up. Sounds good. And then we'll rock Rex. And then if they call me back and said like, oh no, they didn't want anything. I'm like, hey, great job. Like the training house doesn't know what's happening. I'm not putting on speaker. I'm like, hey, great job. Nice job getting a sponsor. I'm like, make sure let's make those 5 calls right after this and before your next appointment and keep booking up. I know you still needed a couple more to hit your goal in the next 2 days. Cool. So I'm in training right now, but I'll talk to you soon. Rock those calls and shoot me a text with what you line up. And then I hang up and I keep going.
And then before, before, during, and after, do you tell your top people like, hey, I'm in training, like, tell me, like, do they still check in and check out, or during demos, or are they? Just
I don't do
during the demo?
before. I don't do before. I do in the morning, and then they call me from the demo, and after. When they call me after, I'm talking to them before whatever else is happening later.
Okay.
I don't need them to call me 30 minutes later. I got to my demo, about to walk in. I'm like, that's a waste of my phone blowing up. Like I've got people on demos, people closing sales. Like, so I know there's managers that love it. I give it to them as an option. I'm like, hey, if you want to pump up before your demo, call me. I'll pump you up. I'm like, if not, I'm like, look in the mirror, pump yourself up, rock out to your favorite song, and then call me and let me know what they're looking at. Cool. So they're calling me. But during training, I was always picking up the phone to close sales with my people. Now, as you're running training, like we're going to have somebody that's on PDI. So like you won't be doing that, Hunter. Whoever's closing sales will be doing that. You will have some calls that come in, and Roman did pick up the phone and he closed a sale in front of them and he's like, boom, so-and-so just dropped a complete set, you know, but they watch the process. It gives them a lot of confidence. By the way, my best shows to training when I was a branch office were my Saturday interviews to the training next week, which normally the further out, the lower the show. But when I finished training, I always had an interview right after training finished, like as a branch. So that 5:30 interview or whatever, I always had during the end of the interview what was happening. People were calling for PDI. And at the beginning of the interview, I go, hey, just so you know, I want to let you guys know in advance, my phone will be ringing this evening. I just finished training some new representatives. And as I'll talk about at the end of the interview, a big part is our support, you know, to our people. Like that's something that they really love, and just the team atmosphere, the support that's here. If selected, you would have that same support. And so they are my priority to make sure that they're feeling confident as they go out into their first weekend. So just so you guys know, if they call, I will be picking up. And if selected, I'd be doing the same for you. And those people were like, that's awesome. You know, and they'd see me talk to them, pump them up, encourage them. And they're like, man, I want to work here. You know, like, that made them feel good, you know? And so I always had like the best shows the next week from like that Saturday interview, like always. So know that, because I've heard people like, oh, isn't that like, like, don't they feel it's rude or, isn't that weird? And I'm like, if you don't set it up, yeah, but if you let them know, like, hey, I just launched these guys, here's what we promised them. And if you're selected, we're gonna do this for you too. They're like, oh, that's awesome. So it's all about framing, so that they know that. So same thing in training, like you're letting them know, hey guys, we're going to be doing this for you guys, later tonight, tomorrow. And like, this is our promise to you to like support you and encourage you. So if I do get a call from our guys, I will be picking up the phone as we're in training and you guys will be seeing what that looks like. And we're going to be doing, the same for you guys later tonight. And I'll show you how to call in properly. All right. So you'll teach them that. So again, I've been talking to my top people throughout, like I know what's happening. Like they just didn't get like dropped, So now training finishes. All right. Training finishes. So today at 5 o'clock, what's the first thing I do as soon as training finishes is I'm going to contact the guys, my top guys who are on their way to their first demos. And again, depending the size of the group, it would be all of them or just I'm going to call my top 5 to 7 and I'm going to text the rest. If you just have like 10, you can call them if you don't have a big team, but here's the deal. I want to talk to my top 25 people in that hour after training. And by the way, that's a combination of both new and old. Okay. So no matter what, my top 20% is getting handled. So if I had 10 trainees launch out, and I've got my top 15 reps for my team that I've been managing, whatever, like those 5 and my 15 are getting called first, and then I'll call the other ones. But by the way, the new guys that I didn't call, I shoot them a text. And I go, hey, have a ton of fun. Make sure you call me. Don't forget 5 before, 5 after. If an appointment reschedules, use that time to book another one. 9:30.
You just ate?
Yeah, we can beat them in like 20, 30 minutes, but just play with them. So
Play with them.
yeah, just let him hang. If you let him hang, you can come over here. He doesn't just hang around. What was I just saying? What were we just saying?
Top 25.
Oh yeah. So like, yeah. So here's, people get caught up. They're like, oh, I'm going to call every single trainee and that's great. And I want to. And if I have an assistant, that's what we're doing. I'm going to call these 10. You're going to call these 10. And then I'm going to call the top 10, 15 from the team. And then you're going to call, the next 10, 15 from the team. And then we'll rock the rest of them. All right. But I'm calling my top reps, new trainees first. So this is the order of who you're calling when training finishes. Your top half of your training class, or all if it's smaller. And then I'm calling my top 10 reps. All right. So top new trainees, text. So top new trainees call, text the rest. The third is I'm calling my top reps. Okay. And then I dive into the rest. I want to PDI my whole team. I want to call everybody that's not closed out for the day yet before new demos start calling in. Okay. So top 10 reps. And then now I'm going to call through the team, just anyone who's not closed out. All right. So yep. I want to close out PDI before new demos. Now, by the way, is everyone like officially closing out at that time at like 5 or 5:30? No, they might have like a 6 p.m. demo and an 8 p.m. demo, right? But I'm still doing my closeout PDI with them in terms of knowing what's happening for tomorrow. When are they checking in? What are the next 2 days looking like? I'm doing that now because later, am I going to have time to do all that? No. I'm gonna have 10 people calling me at the same time. Like, I'm not gonna have time to do all of that. So before it's like the calm before the storm, like I want to use like when you were napping here, that's when I'm calling through my whole team. All right. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm like, boom, let me call through my team and make sure that they're all set up and they're all like ready to go. Now, some I closed out that morning or they were like out of town and they weren't working that day or, they at 2 o'clock when they finished, they were like, hey, I'm done for the day. They're off tomorrow. They've got their 4 for Monday. I don't need to call them at 5. I'm just like, hey, hope you have a kick-ass Saturday night. I'll talk to you tomorrow before your first demo. I'll still shoot them a text. I'll just like, dude, have fun tonight. Make sure to check in before your first demo tomorrow. And they're like, oh, thanks, Kat. But it's very like personal, like it's not like, hey, what are you doing? Like I already know what they're doing. So I'll just be like, hey, hope you have mom's dinner is awesome tonight. I'll talk to you tomorrow before your 10 a.m. So again, if you know what's happening, it makes it really easy to always be managing. And it's not like, let me sit down and go. It's just like, I know what's happening with everyone, and whoever I don't, I need to make sure I do. And then driving them towards their goals. So anyway, yeah, I'm doing my closeout round to anyone who's not closed out after that. If by the way, there were people, or excuse me, I missed one. I didn't write this out before I gave this talk. I'm just doing this off the top of my head of what I do.
You're doing great.
But anyone who doesn't have, when I was calling the top reps, all right, the first group that I called were the top reps that like have a demo now, like that either have a demo or don't have a demo. It doesn't matter. Like I'm calling those guys like top reps. Then I called my top 10 reps that I needed to know what's happening with them. Right after them, before I do the closeout round, I'm calling any other new reps that didn't have a demo right now. Okay, so it's like top reps, whether they have a demo or not, all right, just to make sure like I'm driving those top, 5 kids because I want them to sell 2, 3, 4, 5 grand this weekend. So those top 5 kids from the training class, like I'm calling them immediately to make sure we're creating action, getting them in the right mental space before their demo, and making sure they're making calls to create more demos. Like I'm driving those 5 kids. I'm calling my top 10 reps from my team to make sure they're on their shit. And then now, before I do the closeout round, so step 3 is I'm calling every trainee that's not on a demo. Okay, so I texted them all, right, with activity to do before, or did we put that as a step? Like text them?
Says top. and
So
then
after,
text
yeah,
them.
so I called the top 5, I texted the rest, I called my 10 team guys. Then the third thing is I'm calling any new reps not on demos because I'm going to create with them now. All right. So I've already talked to my top 20%, and now I'm calling my new trainees that are not on a demo because their first demo, let's say Eduardo, their first demo is at 7:30 or 8, right? So this is 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever. They didn't get that first slot booked. You guys with me? So these are the people who didn't get that first slot booked. All right. Now, by the way, if they were my top 5, when did I talk to them? Immediately. Either I tried to keep them after training to just make calls there and book an immediate one, or I'm talking to them on the phone. Okay. I texted the other guys because I want to make sure I talk to my top reps, right? That I don't forget about my guys on my team. And then I'm going to go back and go, okay, who's not on a demo right now? And I'm going to call and say, hey, did you get to make any calls yet? Right? Why? Because I shot them a text telling them to take action if like someone reschedules, if you don't have an appointment. And I can give you guys, I can write out a text that I used to send out. All right. Yeah, so I'm contacting those guys and I'm giving them the stories of Jack and of Stephanie and of people that like, didn't have a demo, and they, instead of waiting, for their next appointment, they like went out and talked to one of the neighbors, got an appointment. Like one of the stories, like they were scheduled on them, like Stephanie's demo had to reschedule the 6 o'clock, so she didn't have it. And then Jack just never booked that time, like he just didn't get booked. And he saw a neighbor, sold a peeler, went to the other neighbor, sold a homemaker. Stephanie had a demo cancel. And I remember I told Stephanie about Jack, and Stephanie was like, okay. And I was like, hey, you had a demo rescheduled, but let's go check with one of the neighbors, or call some of your, your top 10 people that you haven't booked yet. And then she called me back. She's like, I got one for right now. I'm like, awesome. And she went and she sold a homemaker and hit her first promotion on her first demo. And instead of saying her first demo was a reschedule and then just going to her next one, she had a 50% increase going into her next one. So that's really cool. And so always telling the reps that, I'm like, how cool is it that, off her first homemaker, she made $100, but off her next one, she makes $150, or more. So that's pretty sweet. So anyway, so I'm calling every new rep not on a demo to make sure we're creating activity and make sure we're creating the right habits. And then I'm closing out PDI. By the way, as I'm closing out PDI and I have a big team, it might now be an hour and 15 minutes after first demo time. Do I keep closing out the team? I pause, I follow up on demos, and then I go back to finishing calling my team. Got it? So the new trainees and setting the right habits for the new trainees is so freaking important. All right, that they get that right away. So I want to make sure that you guys, it's like, oh, but I had to close out everybody. Like you have to, it's a juggle, right? And some people aren't good at that, but it's just knowing like what's most important right now. It's like, okay, it's 7:15. I had kids with a 6 o'clock demo. I need to make sure I follow up. Because again, there's going to be the ones that had the reschedule and they just like were sitting around playing video games until waiting till they're 8 o'clock. And we want to catch that of like, oh yeah, no, I've just been hanging out with my family. And I'm like, all right, awesome. Like, hey, for future, you were planning on working during that time anyway. So what most of our top guys do, like if they ever have a demo or schedule, they'll use that time to make 20, 30 calls or book an immediate, because while they're making calls, they'll ask them, hey, I can head over right now. I actually had someone that had to reschedule with me. Are you guys by chance available now? And they just throw it out there. And some people will be like, yeah, come over, and others are, oh no, we're busy. Hey, no worries. Figured I'd ask. I'm just working really hard. And that's my key phrase. You guys have heard me say it if you've been to any workshop of my phones. But that was like a key thing when I was a rep was like, oh, no worries. Figured I'd ask. I've been working so hard, and so it's no pressure. And it also shows customers that like you're working hard, So that's really big. So that is my process of like once training finishes. So like through training of making sure I'm touching base with my guys. When training finishes, I'm calling the top reps to make sure they're in a good state going into their demos or creating activity, the new launches. I'm texting the rest of them. I'm calling my top reps. Then I'm calling anyone not on demos to see what else I can create. Then I'm going to close out my team. I'm pausing when I need to follow up on any demos that are an hour and 15 minutes after. And then I keep going with closing out people. And I was usually like doing that, having some beers outside at the beach because my first district were right next to the beach, which is pretty cool. So you can be wherever, you don't have to be at your office, you just want to get that done. Now, what I did do at my office was call the top 5 reps, call the top 10 reps. I wanted to call them before I did anything. And then I'd start calling the other ones while I was driving somewhere or whatever. And then like be in a chill place so I could just relax and, be on the phone. So that's the process for that. And then you guys know the next day, the next morning, you have the morning check-in. And the morning check-in is for the new guys, okay? And anybody who did have Sunday morning demos that's checking in, but you're not checking in your regular team on Sunday morning unless they were doing morning demos or they told you they were doing morning phone tag. Cool? You're not doing outgoing to your whole team. You're doing outgoing to anyone who said, I'm making calls in the morning or I have a demo in the morning. But you are doing outgoing to your new training class. So I would put that as the day after training, outgoing to all new guys, and then team members who were phoning or had demos. All right, so that's Sunday morning. If it's Saturday, you're gonna be checking everybody in. But Sunday mornings, I'm not calling everybody on Sunday morning. I'm only calling the new training class, anyone who had demos, anyone who was phoning. All right. So those are the guys that I'm calling, and then I'm just checking in throughout the day. And then in the afternoon, usually around 2 is when I would do a round of outgoing on Sunday to check in with the rest of the team for like PSP, whatever, make sure they were set up for the week. All right. And finish the week strong. So that Sunday afternoon is, hey, we still have 36 hours, or we still have, 24 hours or whatever, to create a paycheck. And I always had the conversation of, here's what's awesome. I go, by the way, you could get demos for today. I was like, and rock out a grand day. I'm like, but even if you didn't, and all you did was load up tomorrow, I was like, the great thing about this job is that you can make a week's pay in one day. And that's another key phrase you can jot down is like, make a week's pay in one day. And I'm like, how cool is it that you can go out tomorrow and do 4 demos, have 2 or 3 sales, sell $600 to $1,000, and you just earned yourself $100, $150, where you would have had as a part-time job. I was like, or you do 6 to 8 demos and work full-time tomorrow, and you have 4 or 5 sales. Averages say you're going to sell $1,000 to $1,500. I was like, and you just made a $300 plus paycheck. I'm like, your friends would have had to work all week to make that $300 paycheck, And they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty sweet. I'm like, by the way, how sweet is it that you can even do that on one demo? I'm like, you don't want to count on one demo because you never know. I was like, but you hit the right one. I was like, you can earn a full week's paycheck on one demo. That's pretty awesome. So just always giving them, again, that exciting vision for them to want to take action and like make calls and set themselves up.
Yeah, I remember the one time when I really called. I remember I was at my cousin's house. I forgot who called me. I think it was Spencer might have told me that just like pop some calls real quick. And I popped some calls. I booked only one. I only did 5 calls and I booked 1 demo. But on that demo, that was my only demo for the week. I sold $2 grand because it was 3 people there. I sold like 800, 500, like the homemaker to basic homemaker to another.
Mhm.
I sold it to each of them basically. Yeah, it was
Cool.
yeah.
So any other questions? I'm gonna stop there. That's what I wanted to go through with you guys. Actually, I mean, and now separately we can go through like how to really like close sales properly, some stuff there. Gosh. Any questions?
I think I got